Good afternoon, thanks for coming. I'm Tim Cartwright, the Family Violence Reform Implementation Monitor. I was appointed by the government in January of last year. The role for me is to hold the government to account for the family violence reforms. Those reforms are based on the findings of the Royal Commission and the government's own 10-year plan. Why am I doing this? Well, as you probably know, I spent 41 years as a Victorian policeman. I saw firsthand the impact of family violence on victim survivors. I continue to see it on an almost daily basis. It's an issue that I'm deeply committed to. I think these reforms give us an opportunity to make such a difference to those victim survivors and to break the cycle of family violence. So for me, it's about delivering a much better community. And that's not just for me, I think that's a challenge for the entire community. Today I tabled my first report to the Parliament. It takes an honest look at the progress against the family violence reforms. I'll deliver my second report in another year's time. I'm required to report annually until 2020. It's important to set the context of these reforms. Family violence reform is an enormous undertaking. It is challenging, it is complex, and it is a real extensive and world-leading undertaking. Some of the things we're attempting haven't been undertaken anywhere else in the world. And so that's an important point to understand. We really are at a point in history that may well, if we get this right, see a much better community in the future. The report also acknowledges the incredible dedication of those who are working on this. Like me, they are very keen to make the most of the opportunities presented. Anyone in this reform area is working tirelessly to make this a better community.
I focus in the report on what I see as foundational issues and three themes. These three themes, these three foundations are what I see as critical to setting us up for the opportunity of success, for the opportunity to make the most of what is a once-in-a-lifetime initiative. First of all, I talk about the systemic approach. The Royal Commission itself talks about the need to break down silos, the observation that family violence extends right across all aspects of government. It makes the comment and the note that if we do not take a systemic approach to this, we risk failing, we risk missing the opportunities provided. Family violence is an enormously complex problem. The initiatives that are being undertaken are enormously challenging. So I am concerned that that foundation is not adequately laid at the moment. The next aspect that I talk about is the management and leadership of the reform, the governance of the reform. Not surprisingly, given the extent of what's being attempted, governance and leadership is an enormous challenge. The government has also gone out and, consistent with the Royal Commission's own findings, has consulted widely, has engaged widely, particularly for diverse communities, to find their opinions, to understand what it is that they want. The challenge with that is that also leads to a whole range of governance arrangements. It is not always clear who has a decision-making authority and where that decision-making lies. So that needs to be resolved, and resolved in this coming year for clarity, for again seizing the opportunities before us. The final theme that I talk about, the foundational theme, is around intensive planning. And I had thought at this stage that we would be far more advanced on this. There needs to be, for the extent of the challenges, there needs to be some depth of thinking, some understanding of what is going to occur, who is responsible for it, that it's going to occur in the right order, at the right time, done by the right people. I don't think that that foundation has been laid yet. There are some positive signs, there is some work being done, but it is still a very important aspect that the whole of system planning, the whole of reform is mapped out, that the dependencies are understood, and that the government, as I say, can be confident it has the right people doing the right things at the right time. In the year ahead, I'll focus on those foundational issues I've nominated and how the progress is going. But I'll also focus on three other areas of the reform, which I've, in consultation with the family violence sector and with the Victim Survivors Advisory Council, has been suggested to me as are critical. First of all, safety hubs, the support and safety hubs, which the Royal Commission itself saw as a foundation of the reforms. Secondly, it's about the voice of the victims and how we ensure that fed back and is engaged in everything that the victim survivors are experiencing, understands what it is that they want to see from the reforms. And finally, it's about prevention itself. We can do all sorts of things, early intervention, we can do crisis intervention, we can improve on that, we can improve on looking after the victims after the event, the victim survivors. But we know that no matter how well we do on that, unless we get prevention right, we will not break this cycle. Make no mistake, this is a long-term challenge. It will take us 10 years, 8 to 10 years to get this right. Each of these aspects is very critical to taking that success into account. There's still time to get this right. It's been a foundational year. Victoria, the world is watching Victoria, so I urge the government to take the opportunities to get these foundations right and for us to be able to look back in the future and say this was a seminal moment in terms of dealing with family violence and breaking that cycle. We have an incredible opportunity. Thanks. I'll open up to questions. The government's reported on its own website that it has completed that number of recommendations. Until those foundational issues are addressed, the foundational issues I say need to be addressed are addressed, I'm not confident that I could say any but the most simple of the implementation recommendations have been completed. We need to understand the complexity, the government needs to understand the complexity before I would say with confidence that those bigger issues, those bigger recommendations have been addressed. Sure. I've had a lot of conversations with the Minister. I've seen, since the 1 November, I've seen a lot of progress in place. I'm confident that the government are listening. I note that press release. I've seen it just before I've come into the meeting. I'll be discussing it further with government. But for me, the bigger picture is around the opportunities that we're presented, and we can't miss those opportunities. So for me, the bigger focus is on addressing these foundational issues, grabbing those opportunities. Yeah. The risk is that we don't understand. If we address the problems as individual recommendations, which is part of the challenge of the silo, using the silos, individual recommendations together don't necessarily have the same success as if we put the whole system together, we understand the outcomes and how they would work together. Family violence, as the Royal Commission points out, in order for us to be successful, needs us to address from the earliest days of childhood and respectful relationships and the culture that's engaged, right through to the early intervention stages, to the crisis intervention, to the recovery, to the dealing with the very worst of perpetrators. It is a system. It is addressing just the courts, just the police problems, just the agency, welfare agency problems is not going to solve this. The challenge is to break down those silos and see the whole system in everything that we do. No, I don't think the election in any way affects the issues. I think, again, I'm talking about foundational issues. I'm talking about the need to address those to make the most of the opportunities that we have before us. That's where my focus is. That's why I've focused on those things that I see are going to be most productive in the coming year. That's not my concern. I've been given a task to hold the government to account, to report on what's effective and to report on what I see as needing to be done to be effective. I think I've carried out that task. As I say, my report was as at the 1st of November last year. Since that time, I've seen significant advance on the foundational issues. It's too early for me to call whether that is sufficient to set it in concrete, but I will keep, as part of my role as monitoring, I'll keep attempting to move this forward, to influence the work that's being done to produce the best outcomes for our entire community. Yes, absolutely. That's one of the final concluding remarks in my own report. Is it is still time to get these foundational issues right. It needs to be done this year, but they can be addressed. Again, it's about taking the most of the opportunities. There's an enormous investment in energy. There's an enormous investment in resources. We don't want to see them wasted. Everyone wants to see this succeed. That's the way I've termed the report.